Hi all, welcome to part 2 of my series on handling and conquering a style. So here, Kasparov again was playing Petrosian, this time in October of 1981 in the Tilburg tournament. So Kasparov again was white, and it seems that Kasparov's style was being conquered by Petrosian, who played even more provocatively than their first encounter. After d4, Petrosian played d5, and after c4, Petrosian just took the pawn. The Queen's Gambit accepted. After knight f3, knight f6, Kasparov played the modest e3. So he just wants to calmly regain his c4 pawn. And Petrosian played bishop g4, and after takes played e6. So Petrosian's heading for a kind of solid Slav/Karakan type structure with e6 and c6. Later. First though, he's provoking white to play h3 and then later g4. So it seems as though there's a lot of pawn moves from white in this game. And white now plays knight e5, so he wants to grab the light squared bishop. After knight d7 and knight takes g6, white accomplishes that goal. And now Kasparov is slightly concerned about this h-file pressure and the slight weaknesses around his king if he castled like g2. So what he did was quite clever. He played bishop f1. The bishop's being rerouted to g2 to cover the light square weaknesses. And also it would seem silly for black to try and castle queenside here, because this bishop surely is going to be dangerous on this diagonal. However, that's exactly what Petrosian did. Instead of castling kingside, he played bishop e7, and after f4 he delayed castling still. He played knight b6. So knight b6 is just eyeing this d5 square. Is he going to put a knight there? After g5, he doesn't play knight d5. He plays actually knight fd7. And after queen g4, now he castles queenside. So, can Kasparov exploit this bishop on g2? In order to do that, he has to start moving even more pawns. How many pawns hasn't he moved yet? Just these two. So rook b1, and after king b8 he moves the b pawn. So b4. Only one pawn hasn't moved yet, a4. There's still time for that. Petrosian now plays knight d5. And, you know, objectively, Rybka thinks it's about equal here. And Kasparov's next move is a pawn sacrifice, which Rybka doesn't really like. It materialistically, like Petrosian, grabs that b pawn now. But first, inserting f5. So f5, kicking the queen off g4. In fact, it's almost like encouraging Kasparov, you know, it's like a boxing match of Muhammad Ali, you know, get all your pieces around my king. That's what Petrosian's kind of saying. So the queen goes to g3, and now the pawn is nabbed. So potentially, you know, normally this would be a kind of suicidal idea with your king on b8 to just nab the b pawn. Especially white has this long, powerful potential bishop on g2. Kasparov plays bishop d2, and after knight d5 plays rook fc1. So how can Kasparov lose this position? He's got a great deal of pressure on the queen side, and this nice potential bishop, you know, with always bishop takes d5 as a potential threat, to dismantle black at the appropriate moment. So how did Petrosian wriggle out of this one? He plays king a7, as if, you know, waving a red sign to Kasparov, who's like a bull. Kasparov, in his book, How Chess Imitates Life, talked about actually his second loss, like he was this bull being led by the bullfighter, and he couldn't get to Petrosian's king. So here after queen e1, he's trying at least to get on the dark squares. So there's some menacing threats like bishop a5. So bishop a3 was played now, and after rook c2, queen d6. So he's anticipated this bishop a5 and putting this queen on this diagonal. After rook b3, now queen e7. So he's rerouting all his pieces. Queen e2, and now rook b8. So what is going on here? Is black really consolidating his pawn up? Is his king still as unsafe as before? Or is there something very clever about blockading white's a pawn? After queen d3 though, the bishop is forced to move back, and now after knight b2, the a pawn is free to move now to a4 to a5 potentially, to maybe to support an attack, you know, via a knight coming to b6 or something coming to b6. But now Petrosian plays rook hc8, and potentially he's got the idea of c5. Kasparov plays knight c4 though, and if c5 he'll grab that bishop, so Petrosian moves the bishop back to c7. But what is going on here? It seems a very complex position, with black facing a lot of pieces from white, you know, against his king potentially. And now after a4, b5 is played, so Petrosian's even trying to gain some space on that side of the board now, with his king still there on a7. After a takes, c takes, Kasparov plays rook a2. So the first sign of tactics now emerging, which could mate the black king. For example, if Petrosian was particularly materialistic, with b takes c4, then rook takes a4, a6 rather, is mating, like this. So these two ranks secure black's mating net, these two files. So Petrosian actually, after rook a2, played king b7, believe it or not. So how do you survive this kind of position against Kasparov? Kasparov played bishop b4, and now queen e8 was played. So potentially the queen's useful there to reinforce b5. Once the knight moves, maybe there'll be pressure on b5. But actually bishop d6 was played here. And now Petrosian just played rook a8. So not minding the trade of bishops here. So there's a very complex position. And after queen b1, there's a threat now of bishop takes d5 in some lines, with rook takes b5 being the idea. Petrosian here plays, believe it or not, king c6. So this move is really provocative. He's threatening to gobble up white's bishop on d6, as well as take on c4. And let's have a look. Actually, bishop takes c7. King takes c7 would be a good move according to Rivka. B takes c4 is too risky here. But actually Kasparov played rook ba3. And now the knight was gobbled. B takes c4, and after check it looks really, really dangerous. Petrosian just took on a6 and played bishop b6. Not fearing Kasparov's reputation. His king, you know, is still not able to be clearly exploited. After bishop c5, Petrosian could have still slipped up here. For example, if he had played knight takes c5, then queen takes b6 would be embarrassing because of that horrible pin on the knight on d5. So that would be crushing with a mate in 2. If he had played king b7, then rook takes b6 is crushing, again because of this pin. So what he does actually is just reinforce his bishop on b6. He plays queen d8. And now Kasparov plays queen a1. And this allows Petrosian to simply gobble the bishop on c5 and now take with his king. Unbelievable. Where is Kasparov's attack again? It's disappeared. His position has again exploded, and he really feels like this bull which has been exploited in some Spanish arena of bullfighting. There's no target now to exploit. After rook a4, he had had enough. He resigned after playing this move apparently. So let's have a look in overview and summary at this game. A Queen's Gambit accepted, and Petrosian played even more provocatively than their first encounter in April of that same year. So here he gives Kasparov that seemingly dangerous bishop on the long diagonal and castles queenside, and makes sure that Kasparov has moved most of his pawns apart from the a pawn, and he just calmly defends really after taking on b4. So he's giving Kasparov, you know, apparently dream attacking position with the two bishops against his king and also open lines. But he wriggles, you know, this bishop a3 and all this manoeuvring back to d6, and now this timely b5 adds a lot of confusion and complexity to the position. So Kasparov didn't really find anything concrete during the game, and these king manoeuvres really didn't help. They didn't simplify the position, and they kept Petrosian's king to be a moving target, like a bull in a spectacular bullfight. So after bishop c5, now queen d8 was played. After queen a1, simply the bishop was gobbled. So after rook a4, Kasparov again disappointed that his attack turned to nothing, and again forced to resign against Petrosian. So it was after this game that he had to really rethink his whole style of play. And we'll see in part 3 and part 4 how Kasparov did evolve his style against this particular dangerous player, Tigran Petrosian. But for now, it was 2-0 to Tigran. I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave any comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.